Hey guys, this is Amos from Tesseract, and you're listening to Interview Under Fire.
All right, hey there, everyone. We are here with a brand new episode of Interview Under Fire. This is your beloved host and Sunny here, back once again. And today, I am so thrilled to welcome back an immensely talented human in Amos Williams. It's an honor again, man. Obviously, always great to have you here in IUF. We're once again approaching a big moment of the year for you and the rest of the guys over at Tesseract with the release of War of Being, unleashing September 15th through Kscope. Amos, I first want to commend you on 20 years of Tesseract. I feel like with the since this all began. I know you joined a little bit later down the timeline, but
Yeah,
the fifth album now in this band's discography, and I know you've had a couple of EPs and live albums and videographies in there. Exactly 2 years since we last got together and talked about what we love most about the music.
nice.
And in there, of course, you've had a few tours alongside your Portals release. Bro, you've been busy.
Yeah.
How are you? We got some catching up to do.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you, man. We've, Ackle's kind of been doing this for, yeah, like you say, it's around about 20 years. 2003, I think he
Yeah.
started just using all those ideas that weren't working for his other band at the time, Fell Silent. And then, yeah, it was just a few short years after that that we started taking Tesseract to on tour, so it's like
Yeah.
me and Jay started jamming with Ackle, and then we got James involved, and then a couple of other vocalists involved, and then from there we are somehow where we are now, which
Somehow.
is 5 studio albums, and who knows how many steps we've taken between there and here. But yeah, we've seen the world, and we've met a bunch of people, and we've had a really good time, and I really hope in 5 more albums time I can say, wow, it'll probably be 40 years for us. It's not like we're gonna rock these albums out every year or so, but yeah, it's really cool. We're really happy, we're really excited by the next, let's say, the next 2-3 years as we start to look at things being planned out ahead. And yeah, it's really something to be still doing this, especially after the world blew up a couple of years ago.
I know dropping an album in the midst of all this makes things that much more exciting, I imagine. I know the last time we did this, we talked about Portals dropped during a pandemic of all years. The vibe is a little different this time around, right? You get to actually do it on the other side. I feel like we're on the other side of the pandemic, but it makes it more that much. You have a tour coming up, album release. That it's almost feels like it's like a refreshing version of you guys, because I feel like before the pandemic, we took all these for granted. And now people are just going apeshit over the new music you guys put out. We get to see Tesseract again. That's exciting. I don't know if you feel the same way with seeing, coming back here again, of course, in the States.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's been it's been nearly 5 years since we were. I think it might be 2018 that we did headline, or 2019, close.
Yeah, somewhere around Sonder.
Yeah, and like we were saying, that was with awesome Pliny, and we were just having a great time on that tour. So
Yeah.
it's fantastic to come back to North America and to see how people like what we're doing with this new album, which, yeah, like you say, it's a completely different world in many respects, and that whole break that happened kind of gave Tesseract the opportunity to not reinvent ourselves in the slightest, but to find that path that we try to stay on, that perhaps for a couple of albums we'd been not following in our own minds, at least, and to get back to what we believe as a band when we get into a room and we take these ideas to a place that perhaps it's not obvious that they're going to go to that place. And I think when you listen to some of the songs, you can go, whoa, where did that come from? And, you know, it's not us being obtuse and going off in random directions just for the sake of it, but there's always there's always a seed within the song that can grow to something that you'd never imagine. And that's where we want to head when we get into the studio. We want to find that journey, and we want that journey to be epic.
And I don't care who you are, it's not easy to accomplish what you guys have done in that time frame. So 20 years is a big deal. And of course, I know you joined around 2006, but following up on a subject that we spoke about last time, Amos, one of the things that makes Tesseract so unique from my perspective is, of course, the live performance. I mean, Portals, for example, that was done live. Of course, you've done those countless acclaimed shows and, of course, festival appearances notched up across several continents. We mentioned that Pliny tour. I would also like to point out you guys are, of course, going to be touring the US, Europe, the UK, Asia, Australia, with support from bands like Intervals, Unprocessed, Alluvial, and the Callous Boys, who've, shout out to them. They've been on our show a couple of times, but you'll be doing a worldwide tour. Here's the thing, Amos. So I ask a lot of questions, of course, about chemistry between members of the same band, and that because I always find those answers very interesting. We talked about this already, but in this case, I do want to talk about the chemistry between the different bands on this upcoming tour, because this is an important tour, I feel like, for a lot of progressive diehards. Do you think it takes chemistry to make tours like this work? Because I feel like this bill, shows how each band complements the other. I begin to think about subjects like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And you do know pretty early on whether it's going to be a fun night every time you turn up to the venue,
Yeah.
or whether you have to work at it to make it happen. I feel like knowing Aaron from Intervals for, oh, I don't know how long now. It's been
Great
maybe
guy.
10 years. Yeah, exactly. We've toured with an earlier version of Intervals when Mike Semensky was vocalist,
Yeah, that's
and Anoop Sastry was playing drums. It was fun, to say the least, because we were the two bands supporting Protest the Hero. I believe I'm going to say yeah on that tour.
yeah.
Um, I
I agree
feel
with
like
you. So
it was, yeah, it was cool. The guys were chill, the guys were hardworking, and Aaron has taken that mentality that, I mean, it's him. Intervals is what Aaron wants it to be, and he's taken that mentality to bring such positivity to every show. Because about 10 years ago, yeah, he had some health problems, and I think that really changed his whole life perspective on things. So I know that definitely from on at least a chilled level, like personal level, we're going to get on fine. And I'd imagine he's bringing the same energy, the same positivity, and especially with, his band members. I mean, look at the bass player in that band. Phenomenal.
yeah.
He's just something else. Jacob is wow. So it's going to be fun for me to be around those guys. I don't believe I've met anybody in Alluvial before, but
Great
I'm
guys as well.
guessing,
They come through a lot through
yeah,
Dallas, of course, not too long ago.
nice.
So you're
I'm
gonna be in great company, Amos. I mean, take it from
cool.
me, from the bands. Callous Boys, same thing. We had them on our show,
Yeah, yeah.
and they've been making the rounds lately. And you're gonna have a very diverse group of fans. I know progressive
This is
could
the
be all
cool
over the
thing,
place.
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is a
Yeah,
cool thing, and
it's nice to bring so many different perspectives under one roof for one night, and I get the feeling that everybody's open-minded, so
yeah,
they're going to be there from early on to make sure they see the whole bill, which to me makes that's a successful tour. If
and
everybody gets a good time,
yeah,
everybody gets to see the whole bands in good fashion as well. We're not going to stick them on the front of the stage. We're going to give them space. We're going to give them time. And I really hope that they walk away from the tour going, yeah, that was a fun tour, man. I had a great time.
you're going to hear those exact words, and you'll be here
I
November
do hope so.
7th in Dallas at the Granada
Awesome.
Theater. I don't think you guys played there last time, but
Hmm.
Amos, before we move on, okay, I feel like
Yeah, man.
we got to discuss this just a little bit before we move on, because it'll be
Sure.
relevant. I feel like, here's the thing, bro. I've been on a Christopher Nolan kick lately, and yes, I
Hmm.
have seen Oppenheimer 3 times.
Okay.
And
Wow.
after I saw Oppenheimer, which if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it, especially if
I
it's an
have not seen
IMAX.
it yet. Cool.
Um, After watching that, I went through, watched Batman Begins, Interstellar, of
Mm.
course, Dunkirk. Do you have a favorite Nolan film that that intrigues you. That's something that you talk about, maybe think about a lot. Even for a movie like Tenet, I'll even point that out. That blew my mind. But
Mm.
on the subject of movies, do you have?
Yeah, yeah.
I would love to know about that.
I mean, I very much appreciate the Batman series. That how many films did he do? He did more
He
than
did
one,
three. He
certainly.
did
He did
three.
three. Yeah. So
Begins,
the whole
Dark Knight,
the
and then
Dark Knight
Rises.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate those because to me that's. I mean, it was fairly it was fairly flat in terms of
Hmm.
character, but the world that was built was really cool. It went beyond the normal, everything's completely dark. It was nice to see the expansion that he wanted to bring to that, and also the cultural references and trying to add some form of social commentary. What would happen if we actually did have some form of uprising, and just to
Mm.
see what ask those questions. So that was really nice. In terms of the other films, I've not seen Tenet, which I know a lot of people have, and I've not seen Oppenheimer. It's an
Okay.
interesting one. I think I've chosen. It's not something that's really ticked all the boxes for me,
Yeah.
and I'd imagine the performance of Killian Murphy is fantastic in that because he's
Oh yeah.
great. But I don't know. There was something I appreciate the impact and I appreciate um, the effect that such a story has had on upon everything. But I kind of feel like it was shining the light in the wrong place. You know, there's a very fact it's going to be a controversial movie.
Yeah.
For example, you will not find that movie in a cinema in Japan for obvious
No.
fucking reasons. You
Very
know,
true. Very true.
but it's interesting that I don't know. Maybe I feel like I want to move away from things that have just a one perspective on them, and I made a prejudgment about this. My thoughts about Oppenheimer were this is not going to look at this from a worldwide perspective because it can't because it's called Oppenheimer and it's about this one man's journey, and it's such an impact. It's such a powerful and impactful topic that it wasn't something I was going to go out my way to see, which is
Mhm.
you know, it's probably to me it's a shame, I know, but time is tight just now, so that
I
sort of
understand.
thing is not on the top of my list.
Yeah, no, Amos, I really appreciate that feedback. It's really interesting to hear from a perspective such as someone as yourself. Uh, I I have thought about that in the back of my head. Yeah, it's
Mm.
not going to sit with, of course, I feel like a lot of people as well. So,
Mm.
um, but there's always that fine line between, what the message conveys if they're,
Yeah.
in that movie as opposed to just from a filmmaking standpoint.
Mm.
So, whether you see it or don't see it, it doesn't matter. I appreciate your perspective, Amos. So,
I'd imagine it's one hell of a cinematic feat,
well, especially when
which
yeah, it
I'd
was
imagine it's
probably
beautiful.
I think it was the loudest movie I've ever seen in my life. Like the
Wow.
seats actually shook. So
Okay.
anyway,
Wow. Wow.
but speaking of, shaking, as far as like just in awe, let's get to War of Being. The fifth album drops September 15th on Kscope. You feel free to finish your drink because I have a lot to talk about.
No, go
I
for it,
have
man.
what a follow up from 2018 Sandra. It's been in my rotation since it dropped. Well, hell, every album from Tesseract has been in my rotation. Of
Thank you.
course,
Thank you.
this is also the first album in 5 years, which I also want people to know, which makes the biggest gap. But take it from
Hmm.
me, everyone. It's worth the wait. I think.
Nice.
I think Amos, people will be very satisfied with this one. I actually believe you one upped yourself with this record. Good luck topping
Nice.
this. Of course, the challenges of
Yeah.
keeping things fresh after 17 or 20 years with the same band.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel ever like any of that? Is there something that you mentally point to that keeps these creative juices flowing? Because, like I said, I mentioned it earlier, it's not an easy thing to do what you guys have done for as long as you did.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. When we, for example, when we wraps production on the video for Being, that's a perfect example of where we're thinking, ugh, how do we go beyond this? we had the same feeling when we finished recording the album. We're like, okay, I mean, this is going to be difficult to top. But then we also had the same feeling at the end of Portals. And maybe that's indicative of, if we're walking away from a project and we're feeling that, then we have perhaps put everything into it, and we're, we've almost battled to the end of it. We're feeling like we've actually put an awful lot of heart and an awful lot of work into it. So it's good to know that from our perspective, we've got a history of going, ugh, we've achieved this thing. How do we get to the next thing? And then to know, well, actually, give it a little time and we'll have the energy again and we'll get there. I think working with the same group of people is part of the fun of it. And it means that you're always going to be very happy and very comfortable. But perhaps you need to sometimes do things in a different way. I know Dan has felt about this quite a lot, that is like, in order to keep it fresh, we needed to mix things up a little. Now, that didn't mean mixing the band up, that meant how we did something. So, not changing who we are, but changing how we did something. And in this case, it was disappearing into the middle of nowhere, which was wonderful for Middle Farm Studios, and working with Pete and Kat there and spending 6-7 weeks there, isolated with, obviously we're connected to the internet, but
Yeah.
it would have been nice to even cut that off and just really become countryside hermits for 6 or 7 weeks and see what came out the other end. So we did that. We lived in each other's pockets for 6-7 weeks, which we do on tour. So perhaps there was something in that it felt very natural to just be there just with the band. And it was really intriguing to come out the end of that with something that feels different to us. But as we're slowly finding out, it seems like maybe we've created something that is a reflection of everything we've ever done. A lot of people seem to be commenting on, this sounds like all and everything about that I love about Tesseract, that you've kind of managed to bring to the top and put it all in one space. All the different eras, all the different attitudes and sounds. And that's not something that we personally got from it when we got to the end of the process, but it's really intriguing to have that perspective and to hear other people's comments on that.
A couple things I want to point out, and thank you for sharing that, Amos. Dan, I think I have a quote here. I think we realized we needed to do something different this time. I love that quote. Jay went on to say it definitely sounds shitloads better than the stuff we've done before. And I also want to point out Peter Miles. If people who don't know, he's known for his work with Architects, Silosis, Doty. Of course, you mentioned Kat of Choir Noir, who's known for the work with Bring Me the Horizon, of course, Architects. Also want to point out Randy Slough and Forster Sable, I think. Saville. Okay, my apologies. But they took a big part in the production as well.
Yes,
there's a lot of expanded metal vocabulary here. Okay, you guys have and this is from what I've seen, you've seen it too. You guys have routinely been credited as instigators of this, gent subgenre, whatever they call it, and of course, Tesseract has since, I feel like, has transcended such associations and are now widely acknowledged as really one of the most authentically progressive and unique bands on the planet. You're one of the most humble people I have ever had the privilege of speaking to, Amos. At what point do you stop and feel a level of satisfaction once a record is done? Or is it just on to the next?
Yeah, I'm not sure that is part of the creative process that applies to Tesseract. The satisfaction maybe, I don't think do ever really feel that. Now, that doesn't mean we don't enjoy things. We absolutely love what we do. But we're never sitting back and going, yeah, guys, break out the cigars and the whiskey. We've done it. It's just not, I don't know, it's just not part of our process, or our psyche even. I don't know, we're always looking at the next horizon. We're always feeling that we can certainly enjoy the achievements whilst it's happening, but they're fleeting, and there's just something in us, in our fabric, that says, "Cool, what next?" Which hopefully will keep us going. Will hopefully keep the momentum going, and will hopefully mean that we are always trying to do something new with what we with our output. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but that's the joy of experimentation. And so long as nothing goes wrong on the way, then it's going to be a wonderful path to keep following.
And that's okay, you know, and I appreciate that insight as well, because that shows you have a dedication to your craft that you have been creating in front of you, and you're always trying to strive and improve the next day and the next day and the next day. And you know, I wanted to talk about that because I wonder what goes on in that head
Mm.
of for a band like Tesseract. But you know, from songs like Natural Disaster to Echoes. By the way, let me know how we're doing on time, Amos. To
You're all
Echoes,
good. You're fine.
to Legion, which may be my favorite track on this.
So tell me what it is about Legion that really anchors you, because it's a fascinating construction.
So Legion, I feel like it just took me on a whole different direction on the second part of the song. I was like, "What is
Ah,
this?" And I was like,
yeah.
"Okay, this is." I would love to personally love to hear that song live. I guess, of course, I'm just a fan, but it takes you. You think the song is taking you one direction. Of
Yeah.
course, who am I to think? You guys are Tesseract. You guys switch things up on us all the time. But this took a
Mm,
different direction where I wasn't even ready for. You know, sometimes time signatures here and
awesome.
there. It's like, okay, this is what I expected. This is what not a bad
Mm.
thing, but Legion was a whole different side of Tesseract that I was probably never even prepared to listen to. So,
That's really fascinating to hear. It is possibly the most collaborative effort that, and it was also one that was mostly finished in the studio, as in composed.
hmm,
There's a huge impact of the collaboration between Dan and Kat Marsh during that. And I mean, it's also one of the, uh, when that song was started and when that song was finished, it's one of the longest gaps, I believe, between the two. I mean, I think we're looking at like 2006. No,
really?
sorry, 2016, maybe a little earlier. I'm a little hazy on.
Hmm.
I can remember when it started, and I can see myself sat in a kitchen in Shanghai, and we're messing around with demos for Polaris. So that shows you how old it is.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
our third album. Um, and it didn't make that, and it didn't make Sonder, but then something about it kept growing and growing, and then we got to the studio and we're messing around with it, but we really only had half a song. And then Jay sat down and started playing with the notes on the piano, and he had a cool idea. Then I sat down and developed it and took it somewhere else, and then between myself and Jay, we put some like a bass melody down that was kind of following that, and then Ackle comes along and makes it this phenomenal sort of. It's Ackle's lens,
Yeah.
you fire anything through it, and it comes out in a way that it's there, but you didn't see that angle before. And then Dan puts this performance on top that's possibly a career highlight from my perspective, for what
Wow.
he's done. I've not seen anything or heard anything like that that is so deeply emotive. And I just think it's phenomenal that that was able to become a part of that song. And that was based upon like some input that Kat had on the, as again, it was something that we had no end goal to this track. And it's a really unusual situation for Tesseract, because normally we have a demo. The whole thing is there. We know what we're doing, and we're basically re-recording the demo so it's at its best light. This was open-ended. This was like, I have no idea where this is going to go. And in fact, I've just remembered we were writing the bass line to like some stuff that Dan and Kat had put down. So it was wonderful to have. It was almost back to front in ways. The vocals went down before the melody and the harmony was completely structured, and it allowed us to play with things a little, allowed us to play off against where the vocals went. And then Dan comes along and just puts on this career highlight performance that I think it's 2 takes, if I remember rightly. So it's
Okay.
raw as
Wow.
hell, and it's wonderful. Because you don't need to edit a performance like that. It's just pure emotion, and I'd love to take him to that in every song, but probably I don't think any artist can do that. It's people like Jeff
Yeah.
Buckley. They've got one song on their first album that was amazing, and that
Mhm.
was it. That was the highlight. And people like Otis Redding have got that same sort of angst and reality to their performance. But again, it's not every song. It's
Yeah.
I think it's something that has to remain fairly singular for it to remain special, and it's such a wonderful example. It's certainly a track that excites me because it is a journey, and you really don't know where the end of that journey is going to be.
And I think you kind of just solidified that Legion is your favorite track as well. I think you've locked that
Pretty
in for
cool.
me. But even with the title track and all the way out to Sacrifice, I mean, I went back and
Mm.
listened through your entire catalog. It's as if each album was a layer added onto the band's sound. There's definitely a sense of evolution in there.
Mm-hmm.
And what does this album clock in as far as like time? Do you know off the top of your head?
60,
Okay,
61 or 62 minutes, I
well over an
think.
hour. Is this the longest record for Tesseract? I don't know if this. I don't know if this
It
is
even
this has
matches the
altered
first
state.
album.
One.
Yeah, it even matches that one,
Okay.
or it's slightly longer. Um,
It's the irony is because Sonder was your shortest,
yeah,
because
yeah.
Sonder, I'm always like I said, I can just listen to that on the way to work,
Mm,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So it's top to bottom finish. And Arrow, just that last song just keeps,
Nice.
oh, like I want more.
Yeah,
And you
that's
guys
good.
have kind of just filled that void for me for the last 5 years with this album. And I want to get into this interesting part here, whether it's the writing to the production process to the structure.
Yeah.
This is very big for me because the lyricism throughout this album, even maybe for others, maybe even for you,
Mm-hmm.
lyricism throughout War of Being is very introspective. It's very thought provoking.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Amos, that, and this struck with the chord with someone like me because I just graduated in May, and hearing
Congratulations.
thank you, and hearing this coming from you really struck a chord within me. You
Good.
mentioned that one particular struggle for you is that about fighting to forgive yourself for being
Yeah.
you, which is a very strong element that this album explores to the point where I feel like it's therapeutic in a way. It's one thing to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, but it's a whole other thing when translating it into such a productive outlet like this. I begin to
Yeah.
think of the weaves and the designs like a theme or a message to your music, whether it's one or multiple. I know themes and concepts are important to you, man.
Mm.
Is that always a big component to songwriting for a band like Tesseract?
I think it is almost like the it doesn't change the ingredients, but it is the complementary condiment that lifts the whole output of a band. If there is a common goal and a direction, and that common goal and direction doesn't have to be lofty, it doesn't have to be convoluted, but you all need to be facing the same way with the same thought in your mind and the same emotion in your hearts when you are trying to get from A, which is like a single small seed demo, all the way to the end of production, which is why we did this album in the way that we did, which is, there were loads of ideas and loads of lyrics that were all set in place before I was able to finish off the main bulk of this narrative idea. And I don't know why I was doing the narrative when we started it. It just,
Hmm.
it was just something that had to come out. But it seemed that there are a lot of themes going on in Dan's mind that they worked very well with this narrative. And, we're both at a similar stage in life, and we're both thinking very similar things simply by the case of we've been around each other for a while. We've listened to each other. These things all create seeds and thoughts. And it was really interesting to have something like this that enabled everybody to visualize rather than just conceptualize, but to actually truly understand when speaking about something. It no longer was an abstract. It was something that, oh, it's almost like that movie that you've seen, or it's almost like that artwork that somebody created. And I think it means that a band just comes into focus. It really does bring that to the front and allows everybody to have a coherent message, but also allows right up until the end, you can go, well, just by saying this line lyrically, it kind of derails things a little because it's in the wrong time scale, or it's in, it's talking about past tense rather than future tense. And it means you can really go in, and the details that you're discussing are clear. Everybody knows what you're saying, and you can actually say to yourself, it's almost like having a codex or a what do they do on like series where they create a Bible, a series Bible? It's almost like having that where you use it as a reference. You can say, well, actually, that character isn't going to feel like that because they've got this perspective on life. So that character, just change one word in that sentence and it puts it on the right path. So the whole song can resonate in one direction rather than it being somewhat slightly nebulous. It is good to be fairly abstract sometimes when you don't want to shove an idea down somebody's throat. And to be honest, people are always going to make their own interpretations, which is beautiful. I actually really love hearing people's ideas about things because it makes me question my thoughts and it makes me go, that's a really cool idea. If it's cool, sometimes it's batshit, but sometimes people have, because there are so many different varied perspectives, and it's wonderful to have something like War of Being that it's seemingly inspiring people to think, which is great, inspire people to be creative, which is even better.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that that's going to generate almost a self-sustaining, perpetually evolving thing that if you can add creativity to the world, that's a wonderful, wonderful achievement in life. And doing that through something like War of Being that is intensely introspective, but as with most things, Tesseract, the microscopic is a reflection, or sorry, the macroscopic is a projection of the microscopic. So what's going on in the outside world can be understood by understanding what's going on inside yourself, I feel. So it's something like that is really wonderful to have had the opportunity to do that through art and in a way that makes people go, oh, that makes me feel like this. I'm going to tell you that, or I'm going to write this down, or I'm going to paint something now, or I'm going to write a piece of music, or I'm going to, draw a picture, whatever. That'd be just wonderful if that's the result.
One of your biggest personal creative ambitions is creating the artwork, and you did take you created the artwork for this album, and if I'm not mistaken, and it shows two characters, and I love that insight. I mean, everything that you just said to me about it really gives this album a whole different perspective that I didn't even know. But after this interview, I'm going to look at it a whole different way. That's the power of perspective. Look at what you just did. And I want to dive into one more thing, because the Strangeland, okay? Because you have something unique here, and this is coming from a gamer. I'm so many different perspectives. So you have something unique here that really gives Tesseract's music another dimension to be experienced by the listeners. What am I talking about here? And I'm talking about the War of Being virtual reality and desktop computer game based on entirely the album's original concept, created by you and Dan. Dan, if I'm not mistaken, he's also the lead designer and developer of the game, alongside Adam Boyd and Kirsty Harvey. I think that's her name. Tell me, if you can, tell me more about this, because there's so much more to this new album than what's just seen on the surface here, because this is a thing of beauty. I even went on the website and I'm just like, oh my god, this is I mean, this is Tesseract just on a whole new level. Was this
Yeah, man.
planned from like day one? The I wonder what you guys are going to build from here on out, because this is a anyway, go
It's
ahead. I'm going to give the
yeah,
floor over
yeah,
to you.
yeah.
There's so much to
It's
discover
really
about this.
interesting. Like Portal's really, I mean, there's no pun intended, but it opened a door for us to have large ambitions. And part of those ambitions were to take some of the ideas and the stories that we have into, be it a film or be it a novel or a comic. And also, Dan's a big gamer. And whilst he was working on doing loads of streaming on Twitch during the pandemic, he started to get into VR. And some Adam and Kirsty were they're part of his team on Twitch, and they were really interested in developing. At the time, they were using Unity. They were thinking,
Okay.
let's develop your studio in VR, and then from the studio, perhaps we can create a metaverse for fans to meet in VR. So it'd be like a Tesseract forum, but in VR. And obviously nothing like what's that thing? Chat VR or
Chat
anyway.
GPT.
No, no, not the AI
Oh,
thing.
not
Not
that one.
this. There's a horrible like. Anyway, there's a horrible VR chat thing that's just
Okay.
terrible. But nothing like that. But like something interesting where you could go and watch all the videos, where you could, I don't know, slam a jukebox and there's all our tracks on there, and you could, maybe just hang out with people, or throw abuse at people like people do in
Mm,
forums online. And then as the visual elements and the texture and the content of um, this story, the strange land that is the narrative behind War Being, became more real and started to get some uh, details and flesh to it. There was more than just, hey, I've got this weird idea about these two people that get lost in a land where time is non-linear and they meet future and past versions of themselves and it's all messed up and then they have to kind of fix things. It became amazing that Dan had the vision to go, yeah, how about we see what we can do with this and we start to create the strange land, because it's possible, as we've proven it's possible. And it was wonderful to see the development of that. And I've always been interested in Unreal Engine because of the opportunities for virtual production and real-time film and things like this.
yeah.
And they then moved everything into Unreal, which is great. So Dan spent the last year learning that. I've dabbled in it every now and then over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. So I was able to start to get into it a bit more because they created this whole, which by the way, what's available now on Steam is just the early access demo.
Yeah.
That is being redesigned as we speak and expanded from the 5 levels into the full album. So it'll be at least 9 different areas and already massive upgrade to uh, the graphics and the look of everything. So it will be, even in VR, is going to look pretty good, which is cool. And yeah, it's going to take the next. I think we're looking at like 14, 15 months definitely of development, and then we'll have the full release of the game. And I'm wondering if we'll change it from being called War Being to The Strange Land. I don't know, because it depends how much of that narrative and mechanics we bring into the game, because it's fairly I don't really know how to simply portray something that's as non-linear as the ideas behind it, but Dan is adapting the ideas
Yeah.
with the game vision in mind, which is something that I don't have. um my vision is more cinematic, more looking at things from a different perspective, whereas he's looking at things as, I want to run around in this and I want to do stuff. And it's wonderful to see where they're taking that and to see how they're developing the ideas for them to be fun in VR and on desktop as well.
Yeah, like I said, it really gives the music another dimension to be experienced by the listeners. And this game will be available exclusively on Steam and playable in VR on Viva, Rift, and Oculus.
I think so, yeah. But all via link though.
Okay.
You know.
I can't wait for for that to drop. Thank you for sharing all that, Amos.
Cool,
I know there's so much to discover than what we just discussed. Right. But I know we're gonna finish up here. But Amos, man, we've covered a great deal of topics in our conversation here. It's always great to have you back on here. The discussions we've had are just so in depth and enjoyable. You being so true to yourself and really sharing your perspectives on my publication, bro. You make my job easy, dude, and I can't wait to see you guys here in Dallas soon, obviously. And I haven't seen you in 5 years, so I would love to come and say hi to you and the guys when you guys are here. So, but here you are. 2 decades, of course, with Tesseract, 17 years for you. 5 full-length albums, the touring, the growing fan base, your relationship with your bandmates, even the music itself. We're entering in, I feel like, an important part in not only Tesseract's career, but your career. I believe also, because there's a level of inspiration of what you're doing, Amos, and you're seeing results, man. That's the important thing. I'm going to point that out. As I round this out, this great interview, by the way, if you were to give your 2003 self, or maybe even 2006 self, advice from this version that I'm seeing in front of me, what would it be?
Really simple, and it's kind of the message that's in the deep sort of allegorical subtext of War of Being, which is don't not listen to that voice that's inside, the one that comes up with the ideas. Don't let it be shouted out. Make sure you can always hear that voice in amongst the cacophony and white noise of everybody else's opinions out there, because they're not the ones doing this. You're the one doing this. Follow it. Just go for it. Don't be afraid. Just do it. The worst that can happen is that it doesn't work out and you get another opportunity to try again. So just keep following that one path that is the reason why you picked up the bass in the first place. It's the reason why you went on stage in the first place, because that voice has only been good to you. That voice has never done anything wrong to you. So just keep listening to it. Use it as a candle. It's the thing to guide you forward.
And I really appreciate that. I mean, really, if you're probably speaking to yourself, but I think you're speaking to a lot of people out there who can take that. But Amos, do you have any last words? Does anything else you have to plug in, or any shout outs as far as Tesseract and the new album before we finish things off here?
That's it. I mean, we're touring North America in the fall, and
you ready for it?
Yeah.
You're excited?
Definitely. Yeah. It's good. It's good.
It's a long tour, man.
Yeah, but it'll be good. It'll be fun.
It'll be therapeutic.
To all those cool places again, and meet all our cool friends again. So I'm really hoping that people come out to the shows and that they have a great time, because our production crew is great and they're going to put everything they have into helping what we do look good and sound great. And hopefully that means that you're going to walk away from the show saying, that's awesome. I've never seen anything like that. I've never heard anything like that, in a good way.
Yeah. No kidding. After Portals, man, now you got to actually bring it in front of course, here in the States, the people are itching to see you guys, like, really one-upped it. But everyone who's listening, this is the wonderful Amos Williams from Tesseract.
Thank you, man.
No, thank you, man. Seriously, I can't wait to do this again. Like, we could make a chronology of our conversations, but
I'll see you in 5 years then,
right?
Maybe.
War of Being drops September 15th on Case Code. If you could do an Amos a favor, just buy the album, because the bands can't do it without your help. I'm old-fashioned, Amos. I still like to have the hard copy in my hands. It's still my records that's sitting in the corner of my room, because I'm old-fashioned. But you can also listen to this podcast on all major podcast streams out there. Check us out on interviewonfire.com. Amos, much love, man. Nothing but the best for you and the guys from here on out. Have a great tour. Have a great time leading up to the release. Take care of yourself, man. I'll see you in a couple months, buddy, when the weather's actually cool here in Dallas, Texas. It's
Sweet.
like triple digits out there. It's
Nice,
insane.
nice.
But take care. Let's stay in touch, and I will talk to you
Yeah,
next
man.
time, buddy. Okay.
Take care. Thank you
All the
so
best.
much, man.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Interview Under Fire podcast. If you guys liked what you heard, please subscribe and share our channel. And please leave a 5-star review, as that helps us tremendously. If you'd like to check out more, visit www.interviewunderfire.com or our social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And finally, we want to thank you all for the support you've been giving us. Keep it burning.